So Sergei is going to talk to us now, and I'm going to just introduce him and let him go for it. So I first heard of Sergei through Tira Warner, and he is a 28-year-old adventurer, author, videographer, and lover of life. He was officially diagnosed with type 1 juvenile diabetes and told that after a short honeymoon phase, his pancreas would no longer produce insulin. While he was advised to go on insulin immediately, he never took the advice. His mother had a strong conviction that taking insulin was not the right way to go and began looking for alternative ways to cope with his condition. When Sergei started eating healthy food and exercising regularly, his symptoms disappeared and his blood sugar stabilized. And now Sergei has become somewhat of an expert in wild edibles. So please welcome Sergei. He's got great stuff this morning.
On the forceps, the stonemason does all the work. The barber can give you a haircut.
From emceeing to speaking, awesome. Real quickly before we start, I invite you all to join me in a big yawn. I know it's impolite, but let's do it anyway. Ready? My friend Thomas Quackenbush, weird name, but awesome dude, he wrote a book called Relearning How to See, and basically his job is traveling around teaching people how to get rid of their glasses. And one of the most important things he says that we all need to do, and we all are taught not to do, is to yawn. Because when we yawn, hundreds of little muscles in our head, neck, and back relax. And that takes stress off our eyes and helps us to see better. So throughout this conference, I invite you to openly yawn, and if somebody says, wow, you're being impolite, you can say, am I? I'm just working on my vision. So, my name is Sergei. How many people have heard my story? Most, yeah, I would say 70%. I'm not going to go too much into how I came to eat raw food this time because my lecture is about wild edibles, so we're going to jump right in. But I will give you a very quick overview. We started eating raw food in my family out of necessity. Everybody in my family got sick. Like Robin mentioned, I was diagnosed with type 1 juvenile diabetes. At the same time, my dad was diagnosed with hyperthyroid and arthritis. My sister had asthma. My mom had arrhythmia, which is an irregular heartbeat. We went to the medical system. They all said, we can't really do anything for you. Take these pills or these drugs for the rest of your life, and you'll never get better. And you can see why we decided not to do that, right? Over the years, it was in 1994, so I guess 2013 is the 20th year that I've been doing this. We've tried many different types of diets. We've tried eating lots of sprouts and then not eating any sprouts, eating lots of nuts and cutting nuts out altogether. In fact, at one point in time, we had listened to every single expert talk about what we should or should not do, that we ended up in Los Angeles, and we literally had no more food to eat. Because somebody at one point said that greens were bad, and they had scientific documentation. Somebody said that fruits were bad because they turned to alcohol in your bloodstream, and nuts were no good, sprouts were no good. So imagine this raw food family ends up in LA, and we look down the list of things we were allowed to eat at one point, and there's nothing else left. Luckily, we heard about this lady, Jasmine, who was advocating being breatharians. So we thought, maybe that's the solution. We're going to live off prana. Unfortunately, the first recommendation for a breatharian is clean air. And again, we were in LA, so What we did is we held our breath for about 35 seconds and then decided that we were just going to eat the food that made us feel better. Long story short, after a lot of research on my mother's part, we realized that we needed to eat a lot of greens in order to be healthy. How many people have read the book Green for Life, or at least have heard about it? Awesome. If you haven't, I'm selling them at my booth just outside the door. It's a really good book about explaining why humans need more greens. Essentially, from raw foods, we ran into some shortcomings in the nutrition aspect of it. You know, most people who start eating a raw food diet start eating a lot of nuts and fruits because those things taste good, and they're very good for us, but they don't have the mineral density that that greens do. And so in the book Green for Life, my mom published these charts, which are the USDA nutritional data for how mineral-rich greens are. And for example, you can see that 1 pound of raw kale has 21,012 micrograms of vitamin A, and the recommended daily allowance is 900. So you're getting many, many, many more times the vitamin A that you need if you were to eat 1 pound of kale every day. Now maybe you're thinking, 1 pound of kale, I'm not a horse. That's where green smoothies come in. When you blend greens, it's very easy to consume a lot of greens in one go. And so basically, when you look at the nutritional makeup of greens, you find out that they're really nutritious. They have many more times the recommended daily allowance for many minerals. This is across the board for protein as well. Protein, of course, is made up of 14 essential amino acids, depending on how you count. And greens, too, are high in protein, which is the most commonly asked question. When you start doing green smoothies, pretty quickly you get sick of kale and lettuce and all the other things that are offered in the store. And for example, I could drink bananas, mangoes, and spinach in the same smoothie for about a month, but after that, my body's like, no more bananas, no more kale, no more spinach, mix it up. And so we advocate using things like beet greens, some of the more uncommon greens, carrot tops, parsley, basil, because all those things have different mineral structures and are also really good for you. And there's more charts about that. A natural transition as we started becoming green connoisseurs was to expand into the wild edible realm. And this is really my specialty, my passion at this point in my life. And the first reason being is that wild edibles are free. Right? And we all love free things. A lot of people who come to me, who email me, who call me, they're referred to me because they have health issues. Many of these people have exhausted their finances through the medical system, and they don't have a lot of money to spend on their health. And this is a great reason to introduce more wild edibles for those people because they don't have to pay anything. Wild edibles, in my opinion, are also better than even the best organic food. Wild edibles grow in soils that haven't been depleted, so they grow further away from humans. And it has been my observation that everything that humans come in contact with, the quality of that thing generally starts declining pretty rapidly. Have you ever noticed that? Wild edibles also have longer root systems, which are able to go down below the depleted topsoil to a deeper level and draw out vital minerals. Wild edibles also offer us more food diversity. And I think this is hugely, hugely important. I was reading a book by Daniel Moorman. He's an ethnobotanist. And Daniel Moorman, one of the things he did is he categorized all the different types of food that Native American tribes would consume. And I started noticing this trend. There was thousands of different plant-based foods. Thousands. In fact, one tribe in particular that I can remember off the top of my head, I think the number was 2,600 plus different types of plant-based foods that tribe ate every year. and another 1,150 that they used for herbs and medicinal purposes. So roughly 3,500 different types of plants that they incorporated in their diet every year. Whereas if you look at modern society, that number is substantially less. You're lucky if it's in the hundreds. Michael Pollan writes about this in many of his books, where we think that we eat these amazingly diverse diets, but really we're eating wheat, sugar, corn syrup, corn, and a select few other things. And my personal belief is that that is why food allergies are becoming very prevalent in modern time, is because we keep eating the same food and our bodies just get too much of those same foods. We actually need to step outside the box and start eating different ingredients and give our bodies a rest. And I really think that the first person who said, eat a balanced diet, he or she meant in the broader sense. They probably said, eat a balanced diet. Eat from the lakes, the oceans, the streams, the mountains, the prairies. Could that be? So wild edibles give us that opportunity to eat more diversely. Eating locally is an awesome benefit of those little guys that grow on our lawn, the little hidden gems. I'm trying to substitute the word wild edibles because I think I've said it about 150 times already. Weeds, we'll call it weeds, synonym. Did you know that if you eat a plant that is local, that you can boost your immune system? So for example, I live in Oregon, and right now is spring. It's probably the best time for learning about wild edibles because there's so much abundance. If I go in my backyard and pick a little dandelion, I can boost my immune system, and actually it'll prevent me from getting any kind of cold or flu or anything else for my local region. Because greens, they are really powerful. They're really good at concentrating energy from the sun, turning it into what we call chlorophyll. Much better than our bodies. So when we take a dandelion from our local environment, put it in our body, digest it, we actually boost our immune system for that environment. When I travel, when I go to places like Thailand or Costa Rica or you name it, one of the first things that I do is I go to the local farmer's market and I find food that's local to that region, fresh food like pineapples or peaches or whatever, and I start introducing those into my diet because my belief is that they will help me adjust and acclimate to the local environment. Wild edibles also help us prepare for unfortunate events if they ever happen. So if there's ever an earthquake or a food shortage, if you learn about wild edibles now, you'll be more prepared. And I think it makes sense to learn about it before those things happen. Hopefully they won't, but it's nice to do it in a stress-free environment than running around, if an earthquake or something ever happened with a book and being like, oh, what do I eat, what do I eat, what do I eat, right? We can make some errors and fix them, and it's just easier to be more prepared. Let me ask you this. Where do wild edibles grow? Everywhere. Indoors? Outdoors? Outdoors, right? So we get some benefits from wild edibles without even realizing them, because when we step outside, we're breathing fresh air. We're also getting sunlight, therefore getting vitamin D. And if I see a dandelion growing over there and I have to walk over to it, what do we call that? Exercise, right? So fresh air, vitamin D, sunlight, exercise. Did you know that wild edibles and weeds can make you more relaxed? And I'm not talking about just smoking them or anything like that. It's been scientifically proven that just by looking at nature, our heart rate and our cholesterol and our tension goes down. There's been a lot of research with patients recovering from surgery, and they noticed that if you put a patient who just came out of surgery and give them a window that faces something green, be it a tree or a lawn or just a bush, they recover in half the time. If you face them into a brick wall or a city or a road, twice as long as what they need to recover. Kind of amazing. If you kick off your shoes and just stand on grass, the same thing happens. Your cholesterol goes down, your blood pressure goes down. So even without eating wild edibles with plants, you're already benefiting from them. And they also help improve memory, because you got to figure out which ones are okay to eat and which ones are not, right? So those are just a few benefits of wild edibles. How many people knew at least some of them or could have guessed some of them? Raise your hand. How many people have heard before that wild edibles are good for them? How many people incorporate wild edibles regularly in their diet? Suddenly the numbers plummet. Why don't we eat more wild foods? Because we're scared, right? Because Into the Wild happened, right? And I can't tell you how many times I bring up the subject of wild edibles and somebody says, "Have you ever heard the story behind Into the Wild?" Indeed, I have. The media really loves to sell us things that are very frightening. And the story of Into the Wild is a really good example, because what actually happened, it's not correctly depicted in the book, in the movie, even less so in the movie. But basically it tells us that even experts make mistakes, so everybody else, you have no chance. In the book Into the Wild, there's this guy, he decides he wants to live more naturally. He goes to Alaska. He doesn't know anything about wild edibles. He doesn't have a map with him. He starts randomly eating plants from the forest, and then he dies. How many people think that that is a good approach to anything, let alone wild edibles? If you look at the actual account of Into the Wild, they've studied the plant that he supposedly died from extensively after that happened, and they found that it has no poisonous characteristics. No more poisonous than kale or anything that you would buy at the store. The official cause of death was actually starvation, and the coroner was saying that from day one, but apparently that didn't make a very good story, and so they blamed it on a plant. There's a really good book called Nature's Garden by Samuel Thayer. It's one of the wild edible classics. And Samuel Thayer has an incredibly researched account of what happened behind the story of Into the Wild. And if this is something that you're interested in, I highly recommend that you check it out. Samuel Thayer, Nature's Garden. Let's lay down some ground rules. I believe that harvesting wild edibles can be very safe and very fun, and it can create memories to last a lifetime. But as anything new that you embark on for the very first time, you got to be kind of cautious, right? First rule that I want to mention is don't eat something if you don't know what it is, right? Common sense. Don't eat something if you don't know what it is. I really encourage you to go onto YouTube sometime and put in "don't eat something if you don't know what it is." I made a rap song. It's kind of goofy, but it'll get it into your head what not to do. And the reason I made this rap song is because I kept getting emails from people saying, "I went outside, I ate a bunch of this plant. Here's a picture of it. Do you know what it is?" It's like, seriously? Plants aren't dangerous. They don't jump down your throat and try and kill you. You have to actually physically pick up the plant, shove it in your mouth, and then have a negative effect. So, first rule is don't eat something if you don't know what it is. Second rule, and these are all very simple, common sense, is every time you eat something new to your body for the very first time, you eat a small amount of it. When we're young, we usually identify the things that we're allergic to, right? Some people know that they're allergic to peanuts or peaches or wheat. And they usually figure out these things early on in life because that's when we're experimenting with new food. Well, when we start eating wild edibles, we are actually doing that exact same thing. We are experimenting with new food. So every time you eat some new wild edible, you're going to eat a small amount first, because even if it's completely edible and everybody knows, you don't know how it's going to affect your body. So we're going to treat every plant as though you might get an allergic reaction and eat only a small amount. Rule number 3 is you never mix wild edibles unless you're absolutely sure how each and every one of them affects you. I learned this the hard way. I'm guilty, I do sometimes make mistakes. One time I ate all of these, or I picked 15 different wild edibles and I threw them in a salad because, man, it's just so good for you. 15 minutes later, I broke out in hives. It was a rather minor reaction, but still it was scary. I was like, whew. And that's when I realized that it's a really good idea to eat one plant at a time until you absolutely positively know how each plant reacts with your body, at which point then it's okay to mix them a little bit, but I still don't recommend it. So don't eat something if you don't know what it is. Try every new plant cautiously. Don't mix your wild edibles. And that's basically it. I mean, that is essentially it. Another kind of 4th rule that I like to throw out there is use all of your senses, all of your 5 senses. So we were engineered brilliantly because with these 5 receptors for keeping us safe: touch, smell, taste, hearing. What's the 5th one? Sight, right? Some people seem to think that the first sense that you need to utilize is your taste. I think differently. I think that the first thing that extends past our body is our eyesight. And I like to encourage people to incorporate all of their senses, right? Like, for example, if I look at this podium, I don't need to taste it to know that it's not edible. My eyesight communicates information to me. It says, this is hard and probably cardboard-like, and if you try and bite into me, you're going to break your teeth. So using just that one sense starts eliminating lots and lots of different things. The next thing that you can do is touch and feel it. What does it feel like? Maybe I'm not certain that this podium is going to break my teeth, so I touch it. Sure enough, it's hard. The next thing is smell. What does it smell like? And I ask these questions to myself as I'm learning about new plants. If it makes me salivate, that's a really good sign. Often poisonous plants, the really poisonous ones, they give me this kind of reaction. Ugh. You know, it's like a very intense chemical-like smell, and I want to get as far away from it as possible. Hearing, what does it sound like? Like in Native American traditions, you'd actually listen to the plant talking to you. But for many of us, this sounds crazy because we live in a society that's very much disconnected. You know, we're too distracted by different things that if you just sit there and you listen to the plant, it might not say very much to you. I take this to mean listen to the environment around the plant. Can you hear anybody mowing the lawn? Can you hear anybody spraying any chemicals? Can you hear any traffic? Listen to the environment around the plant and see if you can hear anything that might make this unsafe. And finally, the last step would be to actually taste the plant. Like I mentioned, you're going to do this very cautiously. In fact, you might even want to just rub it on your lip at first if you're not certain, because your lips are very sensitive, and if you rub it on your lip and experience any burning or discomfort, it's probably a worthwhile endeavor to double check that the plant is edible, make sure that you have what you think you have, find an expert, get a good book, that kind of thing. You following me so far? Without further ado, let's just look at some common plants and see how we would eat them and that kind of thing. What is up here on the slide? Grass. Regular, absolutely regular lawn grass. How many people know what grass looks like? Congratulations, you're all wild edible experts because you just identified over 400 different types of food. There's over 400 different types of grass, and you can eat all of them. Sure, it's not going to be the most delicious food, but it's going to be rich in chlorophyll, amino acids, minerals, vitamins, and enzymes. If you chew on grass, because it's very fibrous, you may not want to swallow it. That might create some issues in your stomach if you're not used to it. But if you just chew on grass and suck out the juice, you're going to benefit from it nutritionally. In a survival situation, for example, it's enough to give you some energy and kind of keep you alive, if anything else. How about this guy? Dandelions. I should mention that most of the slides that I show, all parts are edible, but we'll address this as we go. So dandelions are one of my favorite wild edibles. Because I was diagnosed with diabetes from a very early age, I had a weakness in my pancreas, and dandelions are particularly good for people with diabetes, whether it's type 1 or 2. They stimulate liver functions, they help the pancreas recover, they're full of vitamins A, B, and C, various minerals, calcium, phosphorus. They promote emotional satisfaction, they're very alkalizing to the body. But most people know them as that bitter green that doesn't taste very good, right? If you blend them with fruits in a smoothie, you can actually cut the bitterness. Then it's not a problem. One thing I really love to do with dandelions is put them in pesto, because when you blend dandelions, bitter things, with some kind of fat, whether it be olive oil or pine nuts or avocados, the bitterness also starts going away. So dandelion pesto, you just throw it in with the basil or replace the basil with dandelions, and it's finger-licking good. The flowers of dandelions are also edible. They actually concentrate vitamin D. And I love throwing them in a jar of honey or agave syrup, letting them soak there for about 3 days, and then using it as a spread, like a jam. So you could put it on toast or on a cracker, or just eat it out of the jar if you're a sugar fiend like me. I like sweet things, I won't lie. How about this guy? Anybody know what this is? Purslane. Who said that? Raise your hands nice and high. Everybody else look at those ladies, those few people. We call those people new friends. Purslane is an incredible source of omega-3s, which make it really good for the heart. And the awesome thing about purslane is that it plagues organic farms. So if you know of an organic farm in the area, one way to learn about purslane is to go visit that farm and talk to the farmers, maybe bring a picture of it and say, do you guys have a purslane problem? And you know what they're going to tell you? Absolutely. And your next question is, would it be okay if I helped you weed some of that purslane? And they're going to say, absolutely. And from there on out, you're going to have free greens for your smoothies and salads that are going to be the most nutritious greens available. I did this locally in Ashland, Oregon, where I'm from. I approached one of the farmers at the farmer's market. I said, do you guys have a purslane problem? And they said, yes. I said, can I buy some from you? And they said, that's crazy. We'll just give it away for you for free. How much do you want? And I said, how about 10 pounds? And they said, well, in that case, just come pick it. And so for many years, I'd just go to the farm and pick it myself. But then they realized that they were losing money. And now at the Ashland Farmers Market, you actually have to buy purslane. So it kind of burned the candle at both ends there, but still, it's high-quality produce. This next one also plagues organic farms. It's called lamb's quarters. And don't worry, it doesn't have lamb bits in it. This is sort of like a wild spinach. Actually, it tastes very similar to spinach. And it's in the quinoa family. So it's rich in protein, just like quinoa, niacin, folate, iron, magnesium, phosphorus, vitamins A, C, K, and it's a great source of fiber. If you're not a huge fan of greens, then this might be a great starter green because it has a very mild taste. While you're asking about purslane at a local organic farm, you might as well ask them about purslane as well, or sorry, about lamb's quarters, because chances are they have both. How about this guy? Clovers, right? Here's a question. Did you know that clovers, 4-leaf clovers, are actually more nutritious than 3-leaf clovers? They're 25% more nutritious? No, but seriously, they are. Clovers are incredible blood purifiers. So if somebody has a tumor or cancer or any other kind of blood ailment, clovers are their go-to wild edible. You can eat the flowers, you can eat the stems, you can eat the greens. You can juice them, throw them in salads, put them in smoothies. I've done it all. The flowers actually taste really sweet, and I like to decorate desserts with them. They're a great crowd favorite at potlucks. Every wild edible has something very unique about it. And when you first start looking into wild edibles, it may seem overwhelming. You may look at a whole wall of green, like a forest, and you might think the first time, how in the heck do I differentiate one from the other? One of my first wild edible teachers, Karen Sherwood, she runs a company called Earthwalks Northwest, where you go to her retreats, and for 3 days, all you do is you harvest plants, and then you make a meal. So 3 meals a day, all you're doing is you're harvesting wild edibles and you're making a meal, harvesting wild edibles, making a meal. I highly recommend it. Earthwalks Northwest. It's out of Washington, United States, so completely on the other side of the nation. But here on the East Coast, you guys have the Tom Brown School, and I think that's out of New Jersey, so that's a little bit closer. And she's a student of Tom's, so it might even be more recommended. But Karen always said, every plant is unique, and if you take the time to study the plant, you'll know it for the rest of your life. And each plant has a tell. So for example, clovers are all things from the pea family. If you look very closely at the rim of the leaf, it'll be serrated, and it'll have tiny little spines on it. So that is your homework. Next time you're standing on a lawn, you find a little clover, and most lawns you can do this with because most lawns will have clovers. You pick a little leaf, you hold it up to the sunlight, and see if the edge is serrated. And you can't really see on this PowerPoint, but clovers also often have this crescent-shaped white mark on them. That's another unique feature of clovers. What season? Exactly, yeah. This one is called chickweed. Who here gardens? Awesome. Have you ever seen chickweed in your garden? It's funny. I used to be an avid gardener, and I still am to some degree, but I realized that if I just let nature do its thing, weeds will grow in my garden, and the weeds are going to be more nutritious than the things that I'm trying to cultivate, and I won't really have to water them or really take care of them. So anymore, I grow a select few things like tomatoes or maybe some sugar snap peas, but the rest of my yard is unruly and overgrown with weeds. And it's awesome because my food is constantly changing. Like for example, this spring, the first thing to pop up was miner's lettuce. And so for about 3 weeks, I drank nothing but miner's lettuce smoothies. It was awesome. And then that season started kind of, miner's lettuce was out of season, and then the dandelions and the prickly lettuce and all the other good stuff starts coming in. So it's like, I don't have to do anything, and the store is just growing itself in my backyard. So chickweed is one of those things that will sprout up in your garden naturally, and if you know what it looks like, it's a really good green to use in salads and smoothies. It's a very tiny white flower. Here it's kind of blown up, but each chickweed flower is about a third the size of a penny. And one of its identifying characteristics is that it has what looks like 10 petals, but if you were to look at it closely, maybe through a magnifying glass, you'll notice that there are actually 5 petals that have a deep cleft in them. So it kind of looks like a butterfly wing. Great source of calcium, iron, copper, potassium, phosphorus, vitamin A, B, and C. How about this guy? Anybody know what this is? Plantain. So bananas grow from this? No? Different kind of plantain, right? Sometimes people get confused. They say, well, aren't plantains bananas? Yeah, there is a big banana from Central American countries called a plantain. Unrelated species. This is broadleaf plantain on the left and narrowleaf plantain on the right. Plantain is very easy to identify because it has a huge seed pod that has up to 22,000 different seeds on it. Each one of these seeds has a lot of husk surrounding it, and that's actually what psyllium husk is made from. Anybody know what psyllium husk is? Psyllium husk, of course, is used as a digestive aid. It's very good for making your body eliminate, making you have a bowel movement. And you can get it at the health food store, or you could just look for plantain, eat the plant, and it'll do the exact same thing. If I was a wild edible superhero, I'd be maybe kind of weird. Maybe I'm weird anyway, but I'd have this cape, and I'd have a utility belt. And one of the things that I'd have on my utility belt was a jar full of plantain. The reason being is because plantain has this incredible power to draw toxins out of your body. So if you ever get stung by a spider, if you ever get stung by a bee, especially if you're allergic, that could be problematic. If you take some plantain, chew it up, and apply it to your sting, it'll draw out the toxins, reduce the swelling, and eliminate the pain almost instantly. Isn't that cool? All of these plants the question was, is it a local one? My PowerPoint is very strategically designed in that all of the plants I discuss grow pretty much everywhere around the world. To date, I've been to 37 countries, and most of these plants I've found in about 30 of them, so that gives you some idea. So whether I live in Oregon or come over to Washington, I still find my quote-unquote wild edible friends. I'll save questions till the end if that's okay. One common identifying characteristic of plantain that's really easy to spot is that it has very well-identified parallel running veins. So if you flip the leaf, it has very structured veins on the back. And if you rip those veins, it exposes little fibers like threads. And I realize that this is coming at you very fast. I don't expect anybody to be completely proficient, but just remember what you can. And even if you learn to identify one new plant from this lecture, I will be happy. In fact, if you learn to identify one plant a week, in a year you'll know 52 new plants, and that's a great start. It's a great technique. One plant a week. Stinging nettles. Stinging nettles actually has 29 times the amount of calcium that spinach does. Isn't that amazing? So maybe someday we'll have a campaign where instead of a white mustache, we'll have a stinging nettles mustache. The name stinging nettles implies that it stings, which is enough to get most people away from using it. The incredible thing about stinging nettles is that the juice inside the plant actually counteracts the sting. It's a fun little fact. So if you're ever walking around in the woods and you get stung by stinging nettles, all you have to do is crush the plant, extract the juice in some form, in some way, apply it to the sting, and it'll counteract it immediately. If you were to take your blender and throw stinging nettles into it, as soon as you pulverize it, it doesn't sting anymore. So one of the things that's coming up in my yard right now is stinging nettles. And on a typical morning, you could see Sergei walking outside with scissors in one hand and a blender in the other hand, snipping the nettles straight into the blender so as not to touch it. Then I blend it with some sweet fruit, and I have the best, most calcium-rich smoothie. Stinging nettles is actually in the mint family, and mint families all have a square stem, which is a really great identifying characteristic. Interesting fact about nettles, too, is that if you blend it up either in smoothie form or if you make a tea out of it, you put it on your scalp, it eliminates dandruff. Pretty incredible. That was it for the plants because I don't want to overload you. But I do have a few other important things to talk about. When we're harvesting wild edibles, it's likely that we're going to deal with different types of environments. And some of those environments are going to have man-made pollutants in them, various chemicals. And those are actually of more concern to me than poisonous plants because human pollutants are much more dangerous. So I've prepared a little quiz for you guys. Will you help me take it? It's pretty simple. Basically, I'm going to show you slides of different environments, and I want to hear you say, yes, it's okay to harvest there, or no, it's not okay to harvest there. Sound good? Golf course. Why not? So the rule for golf courses is you never, ever, 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 ever want to harvest from a golf course. I would go as far to say as if you live near a golf course, you shouldn't even harvest from your own yard. That's how serious it is. Because the chemicals they use to make the grass stay green, pretty incredible, and you definitely don't want them in your food source. I've heard that there's organic golf courses popping up. I wouldn't even trust it because the golfers that golf there have likely been on a non-organic golf course. So, golf course, bad idea. How about a pristine forest setting? But the FDA doesn't regulate it. How do you know that it's certified organic? How do you know that a deer is not peeing on wild edibles there right now? Well, it's a good idea when you're walking through the forest and picking wild edibles maybe to look upstream to make sure that some creature isn't peeing in it right then and there. But as far as our earth is concerned, my opinion is that this is as good as it gets. If you're in a pristine forest setting, if you're especially high at elevation somewhere, not too high because wild edibles don't generally grow above 7,000 feet above sea level. But if you're above any kind of factory or any kind of, man-made structure that might potentially contaminate the area, you're in the clear. It's okay to harvest some of those things, take them home and wash them or wash them in the stream. Go to your comfort level, but I believe that it is as good as it gets. Even an organic field is often placed near a road, and there's going to be some types of contaminants there. So this is as good as it gets on our planet today. And I am completely okay with harvesting there. How about an apartment complex? Why not? Dogs, humans, lots of traffic. Say that again? Pesticides, exactly. What if you live in an apartment complex and you really want to eat wild edibles? Are you just out of luck? Maybe Sergei's advice is to move. No, that's a joke. One thing you could do if you live in a place like this, especially if you have a balcony, is you can actually cultivate wild edibles in pots on your balcony. That's totally acceptable. I used to recommend seedsofchange.com because periodically they would sell purslane and lamb's quarter seeds. And you could actually cultivate them, grow wild greens on a balcony or in your garden or whatever. Recently, I've been told that they were purchased by some Monsanto GMO company. So I don't know if I can recommend that until I research it more, but I would say that likely there's some company in your local area here in DC that sells organic seeds, and it's not unlikely that they would have seeds for purslane or lamb's quarters. The other thing is that you can collect your own seeds. You can find some lamb's quarters, take the seeds, dry them, put them in plants. So find somebody with a garden, find somebody who has a weed problem, collect the seeds. How about a road? But look, you're saying no, and yet on the left there, you see that they're growing wheat, and on the right, there's another field that's getting ready to grow something else. Everybody says wild edibles are dangerous, but most of our bread is made from wheat that's grown right near a road. Does anybody want to retract their answer? My rule for roadways is that you got to distance yourself from the road as much as possible. In this day and age, when there's roads pretty much everywhere, it's hard to say you can't eat something that grows near a roadway, because that's almost impossible. So I would say give yourself 50 to 100 feet from a roadway and call that the safe zone. Likewise, be smart about it. Like, for example, if the road is on a hill, pick wild edibles uphill, right? Because roads have all kinds of tar and all kinds of chemical residue that would run off with rain and go downhill. And I do this sometimes. One time I was driving through the desert in Arizona, and I saw prickly pears growing right on a cactus near the roadway. And I figured if there's one near the road, there's got to be one off the road somewhere. So I parked and I went on a little hike, and sure enough, about 100 feet away to the left, I found more cactus with more prickly pears. So just give yourself some distance from the road, and then it's okay. How about your own yard? And this isn't my house, by the way, but I wish it was. Is it okay to harvest from your yard? It depends on what? On your neighbors. Sure, don't blame your neighbors. It depends on whether you and, of course, your neighbors, whether they spray. If you spray your yard, I recommend waiting a minimum of 1.5 years before you harvest wild edibles from your yard. I think it's a good idea to knock on your neighbor's door and offer them something nice, meet them, and then casually throw in their ear. By the way, do you spray your yard? Yes? Oh, 2 minutes. Gotcha. How about a public area, like a public park? 50 feet. I'm actually not opposed to harvesting in a public park, but look for areas that have low flow. Like go to the unbeaten track. Also, it's a great idea to call the Park Service and figure out if they spray. That's actually an essential, I would say. In my local area, I called the Park Service. I said, hey, can you guys give me a map of where you spray, where you don't? And they were really nice, and they kind of drew X's where they did. So it's nice to communicate. Awesome, you guys passed. I'm actually running out of time here, but I'm going to be around all weekend, and when I'm not emceeing on the stage, feel free to come and ask me questions. I have a lot of different resources on wild edibles, both free and paid. You can visit my website, which is poweredbygreensmoothies.com. I also have a wild edible app for your iPhone. We're working on an Android one, so sorry to kind of pick on or to exclude you at this point, but the Wild Edible app is awesome because you can take it with you wherever you go, and it helps you identify plants on the go. And I'm excited to announce that July 16th of this year, I have a new book coming out. It's called Wild Edibles. And it's 2 years in the making, and I'm really thrilled that it's coming out. I think it's going to be a really good book. So thank you so much for listening to me.